Hello, everyone. My name is Jack Budd. I'll be presenting on slideshow presentation number 2 of our Florida Ecology and Natural History Lab. So let's get right into it. So our first ecosystem was the freshwater marsh at Orlando Wetlands Park. It's a non-forested wetland with a long hydro period and a high density and diversity of floating or emergent herbaceous vegetation. So although there's often no canopy, sometimes it's interspersed with stunted or isolated stands of bald cypress trees. This is a deciduous conifer, deciduous meaning that it will lose its needle-like leaves in the fall and winter months. It's also known for its cypress knees or pneumatophores that stick out of the ground or the water for air collection and transfer. And it was harvested a lot back in the day for its commercially effective rot-resistant hardwood. Here we have a couple emergent aquatic wildflowers. On the left is pickerel weed, which has the tubular shaped stalk with these purple blue petals sticking out. It also has these yellow cues on the flowers for pollinators, mostly bees, to come to. It has a very large range from Canada to Argentina. On the right is the lance leaf or bull-tongue arrowhead. This is actually an imperiled listed species. It has those large lance-shaped leaves, as well as stalks that extend outside of, or above the leaves. And those have the 3 white petals and 3 green sepals of the wildflower itself. Moving on, we have some more emergent aquatic vegetation. On the left is many-flower marsh pennywort. Again, this is a floating or emergent aquatic plant. Its name is based off of the disc-shaped leaf that is peltate, meaning that the stalk actually goes to the underside of the leaf, and it has these kind of subtle ridges around the leaf. And the way you differentiate from another common species in the genus is that the leaf goes all the way around, is encircled, while another very common species has a notch that goes into the center of the leaf. This is also commonly invasive across the country or across the world. On the right, we have spatterdock. This is also known as water lily. So the characteristic wildflower is actually made up of cupped yellow sepals and then a yellow lobe stigma in the center. The leaves are large, like your characteristic lily leaves, and typically sit either just above or below the water surface. And it was used by Native Americans for plant food, as well as for medicinal purposes. We have some more flowering plants that are adapted to wetland habitats. On our left is the angle stem primrose willow, which have these angle stems where it gets its name, as well as these alternate lanceolate-shaped leaves. Another thing to look at is the 5 yellow petals, as well as the 5 green steeples that stick out atop of the petals, as well as the seed capsules, which are elongate and start to turn this kind of reddish-brown color before they fall off eventually. On the right is climbing hemp vine. This is an herbaceous flowering vine that grows on the fringes of wetlands. It has these kind of short, compact, whitish to pink flowers that are in brackets. It's actually an important larval host for this one species of butterfly, where there's only one member of its family in Florida. Moving on to some of our wetland bird species, we have the turkey vulture, so not characteristically a wetland species, but they kind of hang around everywhere. They're ubiquitous. So the main way to tell the difference here is that characteristic red head, as well as the underside wingtips being white all the way around and not just at the very tips, like it would be for a black vulture. So they actually have extremely acidic stomach acid, which allows them to digest almost anything, including carrion, and not have to worry about diseases. Here we have the common gallinule. It has very dark plumage, and then it has this characteristic red frontal shield. It can be found in marshes and ponds from Chile all the way up to Canada. And then often you will hear it before you see it with its distinct vocal clucking. And then another adaptation it has is its long toes that allow it to walk on mud and floating vegetation, as you can see here on the left. Another bird we found here is the great blue heron. This is a large wading bird. It's tall and slender with an S-shaped neck, and it's grayish blue and has a black crown on the top of its head. The beak and the legs are yellow, and it's capable of hunting day or night due to high amounts of rod-type photoreceptors in the eyes, which allows it to hunt either diurnally or nocturnally. After that, we have the great egret, related to the great blue heron. Is also very same kind of characteristics, aside from being completely white and having legs that are black, a beak that is yellow. This is a cosmopolitan species, meaning it's found on every continent except for Antarctica. And this is a conservation success story because it was almost hunted to extinction, and it actually influenced some of the earliest laws and protections for migratory birds. On the right, similar story here is, but we have the snowy egret. So it's a little bit smaller than the great egret. It also has a black leg and black bills, but it has yellow feet. It also has a patch of yellow right behind the bill near the eye. Again, another conservation success story, almost hunted to extinction due to the demand for its plumage, but now it's only a species of low conservation concern. We have some more species we saw. We have sandhill crane here, large body bird with long legs. The main kind of ID characteristics are the gray plumage as well as the red crown that it's known for. And although most of the populations around the world are migratory, the Florida populations are actually some of the only ones that stay around year round in Central Florida. On the right, we have Anhinga. This is a large water bird. It has that snake-like neck that it's known for. And although it is a water bird, it doesn't have waterproof feathers. So that's why it's often found basking with its wings out like in this picture. That's in order to dry the waterlogged feathers so it's able to take flight. Now moving on to some of the invertebrates we saw, we have the eastern pond hawk. This is a carnivorous dragonfly found in ponds and still waters around most of the U.S. and Central America. So there's actually kind of two variants. You have the females and young males, which are green with a banded abdomen, while the mature males will be that kind of grayish blue color as you see in the picture here. Interesting enough, a reproductive adult has a total lifespan of 10 days before they die off and restart the cycle. On the right, you have the white peacock. This is a butterfly that's found kind of all throughout the Americas and the tropical areas. Wings have this white base with the light to beige brown markings, and then the edges have that double row of orange crescents. And then you have those kind of characteristic dark eye spots on the forewing, which is the top wing, as well as the hind wing, which is that bottom inner wing. And then the males actually display unique territorial behavior as they'll guard an area surrounding the larval host plants that they're kind of obligate to. Moving on to some other animals we saw, both herps here, we have the American alligator, which is a large crocodilian endemic to the southeastern U.S. And again, another kind of conservation success story where they were listed as endangered species, but due to protections, they are now listed as a species of least conservation concern. And so I guess the main ID characteristic you want to look at is that it doesn't have the teeth sticking upwards that you might confuse with like an American crocodile. On the right, we have the Florida green water snake. This is often confused with a banded water snake, but there's no banding here, as well as there's the presence of that supraocular scale, so that scale between the lip scales and the eye that is only present in this species of water snake. And then the head is a little bit thicker and the eyes are more oriented on the top of the head because it feeds on amphibians. So moving on to ecosystem number 2, we have our freshwater swamps that we saw at Tosahatchee. So this is the main difference is going to be that it's forested. We'll have a shorter hydro period typically and is more ephemerally wet, but it is flooded most of the time, and there's often a high density of epiphytic and herbaceous plants. So first up, we have the swamp shield fern. This is a fast-growing perennial fern found in wet marshes and swamps. It's actually kind of found both in the New World and the Old World. And interestingly enough, in the Old World in Africa, the fronds are used to carry head pads to carry loads in some African countries. And the way you'd ID it here is the long fan-like fronds that are opposite, not alternate. And then they'll be kind of lobed, pinnately shaped with slight points at the ends. Next up, we have another fern, the giant leather fern. This is a massive, long-lived evergreen fern that can reach up to 12 feet high as well as wide. The fronds are long, like I said, and pinnately divided. And then the leaves are this deep green color on top, and they're paler on the bottom. And then on occasions, the underside can be reddish brown, but that's because of the spores when it's getting ready to reproduce. And then this is the largest fern in the state of Florida, and the only state where this fern is found. Moving on, we have the longleaf camphor weed. This is a perennial aster. This actually one is endemic to Florida and listed as vulnerable. And the way you can tell it from The more ubiquitous camphor meat species is that the leaves are a lot longer, wider, as well as they kind of overlap each other. While the more common one will have more alternate leaves that are narrower and smaller. And then you have flowers arranged as heads at the end of the stems, and they lack petals. Next, we have this epiphytic plant. This is long strap fern. It thrives in shady environments. It has these long, narrow fronds. They're lanceolate to linear in shape that can grow up to 3 feet in length, and they're dark green and glossy. So this was a popular ornamental plant throughout history, and was even grown in the Victorian era. After that, we have giant sedge. This is a perennial sedge found primarily in wet shaded sites in the southeastern U.S. Uh, that flower spikes are probably the main takeaway here. They're large, greenish brown, and they emerge in late spring to fall. It's currently ranked as imperiled in South Florida specifically, and then it also has these long, slender leaves that form clumps. After that, we have narrow fruit horned beak sedge. So I didn't get a great picture here, but as you can see from the picture I provided, you can see that distinctive flower head made up of slender spikes, as well as the seed, which is horn shaped and elongate with the beak structure at the end where it gets its name. But the base of the plant will grow in clumps up to 3 feet tall with these leaves that are long, narrow, smooth, and linearly shaped. So again, it's sedge, so it's grass-like in appearance. Moving on to some of the fauna species we saw, we have the dusky pygmy rattlesnake, the smallest rattlesnake in North America, and it's actually responsible for the most venomous snake bites in Florida, although these are hardly fatal. So the base color is gray with dark blotches on the sides and on the back. And then in between the blotches on the back, you have these reddish to orange markings. They're usually more prominent higher up on the snake, and as you extend downwards, they kind of start to fade. And then because it's a pit viper, it will have a triangular shaped head with loreal pits, so 2 pits in between the nostrils and the eyes, as well as this dark band that goes from the eyes into the side of the face. We have another snake here, eastern ribbon snake. This is a slender-bodied colubrid snake. So the main takeaway, it's going to have more of a rounded head, large prominent eyes, and then this one conspicuous lighter tan stripe that extends longitudinally down the snake. And then the base color of the snake is mostly brown. And another difference to compare garter snakes, which are similar to ribbon snakes, is that distinct white spot behind each eye, as well as the stripe that's on the side instead of on the top. And then another herp here, we have a greenhouse frog. This is actually non-native from the Caribbean. And interestingly enough, it's parthenogenic, which means not anadirect developer. So that means that it skips the tadpole stage, and also they can reproduce, females can reproduce without a male entirely. And then to ID it from any native hylidae species, you want to look for the lack of toe webbing entirely. And then some of them will have, as you can kind of see with this one, a darker mark on the head. And then there's kind of 2 variants where you have the mottled coloring like this one, as well as one where there's two stripes extending downwards in the back. So moving on to our final ecosystem, we have the mangrove swamp. This is an estuarine wetland inundated by saltwater via tides, and then it's dominated by mangrove trees, with the dominant mangrove tree correlating with the amount of inundation and the tolerance of salinity. So first up, we have the red mangrove. This is the mangrove tree that is most tolerant of saltwater and inundation. The leaves are thick, elliptical, and simple, and it has these inflorescences that you can see as the bottom that are small, yellow-green, and star-like with 4 leathery petals. And then at the top here, you can see the propagule. So mangroves, for the most part, are viviparous, which means that the seed will germinate on the plant itself, and then will fall off and then already be germinated before even reaching the ground or the water. And then it's listed as vulnerable in the US. So next up, we have the black mangrove. So this is slightly less tolerant of inundation and saltwater, and so at slightly higher elevations in a mangrove swamp. So the main takeaway here for this guy is the pneumatophores, or the root-like projections above the water, which same thing for like a cypress tree. They use it for oxygen transfer into the submerged roots. So the leaves are going to be shiny on top, paler and pubescent on the underside. And then when in bloom, they have flowers that are small, white with yellow centers. And as you can see at the top here, this is the propagule for the black mangrove. It is a kind of small lima bean shape. After that, we have the white mangrove. So this is the evergreen mangrove tree. Again, it's going to be slightly higher elevation than the black and the red. There's no visible roots here, but in some conditions it can develop a peg root. So the leaves are going to be yellow-green, broad, rounded, and have 2 sugar glands at the base of the leaf. And then these guys will also produce flowers, but they're in spikes instead of florets. And the fruit, as you can see at the top, is a brown drupe with these longitudinal ridges. It can sometimes act as a propagule, but otherwise it's just your typical seed. Finally, we have the last mangrove species, and this is kind of a transitional species between upland habitats, buttonwood. So it has leaves that are alternate, leathery, and pointed tips with smooth edges. And these leaves will have 2 salt glands at the base of each leaf. And then they're called buttonwood because of the dense flower heads that grow in clusters, forming this cone-like fruit, as you can see at the top picture, and is the only mangrove that does not reproduce using a propagule. Instead, it has seed cases. And then it's listed as critically imperiled in the US. Next up, we have the sea oxeye, which is a perennial flowering shrub. It's known for having these yellow ray florets. However, that we don't see it in this picture here. The leaves are oval to lanceolate, and they're grayish green and pubescent, so they kind of have this shiny, hairy dynamic going on, as you can see at the top picture. And the fruit is a dark cypsela that contains a single seed. You can see that and that spiky thing on the bottom picture. Moving on, we have perennial glasswort. This is a succulent prominent in saltwater marshes. So there's leaves on this one, but it's very minuscule and you can't really see. But otherwise, you can see the stems that are jointed and branching opposite. It is halophytic, which means it likes being in salty conditions. However, it cannot tolerate being fully submerged. And then, as you can see at the bottom, there's a younger glasswort, which is mostly this kind of vibrant green. At the top, you can see one that's a bit older, where the ends of the stem start to become this reddish color and then eventually becomes brown and even woody. Next up, we have the Florida strangler fig. This is, at its early stages, a hemiepiphyte, which has been part of its life cycle as an epiphyte until eventually becoming its own tree. It's native to the subtropic and tropic regions of America, which only accounts for 2/3 of Florida. And as you can see here, the leaves are long, shiny, and alternately arranged. And then typically will also produce this red, fleshy fruit, but it's not prominent on this particular individual we saw. And then moving on to some of the fauna, you have the straight-banded nursery web spider on the left. So you can kind of ID this one due to that brown base color and the pale borderings on the abdomen there, as well as the straight band on the cephalothorax. So these guys actually hunt by skimming on top of the water. And interestingly enough, the females are known for maternal care, can carry egg sacs around as the one on the left is doing. On the right, we have the common buckeye, which is a butterfly. It has that brown base color, those kind of orange bars at the top of the forewings, as well as that prominent dark spot at the bottom of the forewings, as well as 2 more eye spots at the hindwings. And then finally, we have the tricolored heron. This is another heron, but it's blue, gray, and purple and white. You can ID it primarily because of the white chest as well as the white stripe down the neck. And then also you'd want to look for the yellow beak and legs. And then this particular heron will commonly build nests in foliage alongside water in shrubs and trees. Sometimes it's in colonies with other wading birds. Here's my sources.